Africa just flipped the script from cobalt in Congo to lithium in Zimbabwe, from cotton in Burkina Faso to gold in Tanzania. One by one, nations are saying no more raw exports. They're no longer just supplying the world's raw materials, but they're taking control of the value chain. What the West calls economic risk, Africa calls economic freedom. For over a century, Africa has followed the same script: extract raw materials, ship them away, watch someone else get rich. Colton from Congo powers your phone, but Congo sees pennies. Cacao from Cote d'Ivoire becomes a Swiss chocolate, but Ivorian farmers stay poor. Gold from Ghana builds wells, just not for Ghanaians. That script is being torn up right now in real time. This is Africa Insights with Hikma, and today we will look into how Africa is staging its biggest economic uprising since independence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with me on this one. Across Africa, countries are refusing to remain the world's cheap suppliers and are choosing instead to keep the profits their resources create. And if this succeeds, it won't just transform Africa, it will reshape the entire global economy. Let me show you exactly how broken the current system is. Africa accounts for 54.5% of global cobalt reserves, 36.5% of manganese, 39.3% of platinum group metals, and produces roughly 600,000 tons of cotton annually. The continent has approximately 30% of the world's mineral reserves and produces 60% of the world's cobalt. Yet 62% of Africa's GDP comes from natural resources, but 4 in 10 Africans live below the poverty line. Africa has 2/3 of the world's poorest people. How is this possible? Let's be real. This pattern keeps repeating across Africa. Burkina Faso grows the cotton, sells it for $1 a kilo, then Bangladesh turns it into a t-shirt and sells it for 30. Zimbabwe digs up the lithium, China refines it and builds batteries worth $40,000. Congo mines the cobalt, China processes almost all of it and takes nearly all the profit. Tanzania exports gold, then buys back the jewelry for 10 times the price. See the pattern? The structure never really changed. Some call it trade, others know it's colonialism. Now, during colonialism, European powers deliberately prevented African colonies from industrializing. Raw materials went to Manchester, Lyon, Brussels for processing. Independence came in the 1960s, but the World Bank and IMF stepped in with structural adjustment programs. Always the same prescription: export raw materials, import finished goods, don't subsidize local industries, open markets to foreign competition. US cotton subsides coast West Africa $250 million annually in lost export revenues. The EU subsidizes its farmers $250 billion per year. African farmers cannot compete, and when they do export, they're exporting raw. The World Bank estimates Tanzania loses $680 million annually in unrealized value from unrefined gold exports. Zimbabwe lost $12 billion through illegal mining sector trade involving multinational companies. The entire continent loses an estimated 1.7% of GDP annually in uncaptured resource rents. That is just theft dressed up as trade. But 2024 to 2025 marks an inflection point. Now, across Africa, a quiet revolution is breaking the old order. The Congo, supplier of 70% of the world's cobalt, banned unprocessed exports, and it's forced the world to realize who really holds the power in the battery game. Zimbabwe followed, telling the world, process our lithium here or don't buy it at all. Tanzania forced mining giants to refine gold on its own soil. No more shipping it raw. Tanzania is also changing the game. Since 2017, mining companies must process some gold in the country. By 2025, all miners have to refine, at least 20% locally. Gold is checked by the Tanzania Minerals Audit Agency before it leaves. They are trying to build local refineries, create 12,000 jobs by 2030, and make an extra $680 million each year. Namibia, the world's third largest uranium producer, is moving beyond just selling raw minerals. Since 2024, unprocessed lithium and other important minerals cannot leave the country. A new $59 million plant is being built to help process uranium, copper, manganese, and rare earth. Uranium production jumped 36.5% in early 2025. The plan is to turn Namibia into a hub for mineral processing and keep more money in the country. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré challenged a system that kept his country rich in resources but poor in returns. For decades, they grew the cotton, sold it raw for cheap, and bought it back the shirts at 20 times the price. Now they're spinning, weaving, and stitching their own future. Farmers are earning more, new factories are rising. But here's the key move. Traoré replaced colonial-era judicial robes with Faso Dan Fani, traditional Burkinabe cotton fabric. Government officials wear locally made clothing, and this creates guaranteed domestic demand while promoting cultural pride. He's building a homegrown textile industry from the ground up, spinning, weaving, everything done in Burkina Faso. Together with Mali and Niger through the new alliance of Sahel states, they are creating a regional market of over 70 million people, all major cotton producers, all moving in the same direction. And beyond that lies the African Continental Free Trade Area, 1.3 billion people across 55 countries. The vision is to turn African cotton into African clothing made for African markets and eventually the world. Africa's resource boom is not like any before. Three things make it game-changing. AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, launched in 2021. It connects 1.3 billion people in 55 countries. No tariffs on 90% of goods over 10 years. And imagine like a Congolese cobalt mine supplying a South African battery factory, then a Kenyan EV plant, all selling across Africa without extra costs. This is a huge market that didn't exist before. Countries are now working together, not alone. They're building value chains, harmonizing rules, investing in infrastructure, and training workers. Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, DRC, and Tanzania, they are part of a coordinated continental plan. The geopolitical leverage. China, the US, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE all want Africa's resources. African countries are playing them against each other, like build processing plants here, or we will go somewhere else. For the first time, Africa is not begging, it's negotiating. Africa is not just exporting raw materials anymore, it's capturing value, building industries, and taking control. And this time, the world cannot ignore it. Global battery and EV supply chain worth $8.8 trillion by 2025. Africa's predicted share, $55 billion, less than 1%. If Africa captures just 5% through processing, $440 billion, which is 8 times more than the current. By 2040, lithium demand will grow 5-fold. Cobalt demand will double. Copper demand will rise 30%. An estimated 3 billion additional tons of minerals and metals needed by 2050 for clean energy transition. Africa has 30% of the world's mineral reserves. The demand is undeniable. The leverage is real. We have talked about the opportunity, the revolution, but let's be honest, this could still fail. And history shows that resource booms often do. Here's why. Technology is moving faster than Africa can build factories. In July 2024, China opened the world's largest sodium-ion battery storage system. Sodium is cheap and abundant. If it replaces lithium-ion batteries, Africa's lithium could lose its value overnight. The same risk exists for cotton. Synthetic fibers could replace natural cotton or cobalt, which could be replaced by recycled metals. Hydrogen fuel cells could replace batteries entirely. By the time processing plants are up and running, the world might have already moved on. And you can't just order factories to be built. You need power, water, skilled workers, and money too. Most of Africa faces chronic electricity shortages. Like example, Burkina Faso has frequent blackouts. Textile and battery factories need huge amounts of water and energy. Engineers, technicians are scarce, and billions are needed to build roads, railways, and ports as well. Africa is rich in resources. 62% of GDP comes from them. but 40% of people still live in poverty. That's the resource curse. Wealth flows to elites, not citizens. Nigeria had oil, Angola had oil, DRC had cobalt, yet most people remain poor. And somehow we know why. That is the corruption. Even with AFCFTA, African countries currently trade more with Europe, China, and the US than with neighbors. Building supply chains, buyer trust, and quality standards takes decades. Bangladesh and Vietnam dominate textiles because they spent 40 years, perfecting production. Burkina Faso textiles must compete on price and quality. Gold refineries must meet international standards, or buyers will simply refuse. So AFCFTA helps, but it's not a magic fix. And most importantly, powerful nations don't always welcome Africa taking control. Leaders who challenge global economic interests have been removed before, like think Sankara, Lumumba, Gaddafi. Now Traore has expelled foreign troops, rejected IMF loans, and defied Western pressure. That's brave. The DRC's Cobalt ban already made battery makers nervous. And finally, nothing works without security. Burkina Faso, specifically, is fighting jihadists with 40% of territory outside government control and 2 million people displaced. If farmers cannot reach fields or factories cannot operate, the revolution dies. Investment leaves, factories shut, dreams crumble. Now these risks are real. And they are serious. Africa's resource revolution is bold and historic, but bold moves always come with big challenges. So Africa has the chance to seize its wealth. The challenge is navigating the risks that come with it. We can say Africa would pull this off, yes, but only under the right conditions. Africa has leverage, coordination, a favorable geopolitical moment, undeniable economic maths, and bold young leaders willing to defy old institutions. What's needed now is, massive infrastructure investment, skills development, governance and enforcement, smart foreign partnerships, patience, and regional integration that actually works. As I said earlier, the revolution won't happen overnight. It's a multi-decade transformation, but the momentum has started. Africa is no longer just exporting raw materials. It's starting to own its future. Now, let me leave you with this. Africa's resource revolution is reshaping global power structures that have existed since colonialism. If Africa succeeds in processing its own resources, capturing its own value, and trading with itself through, AFCFTA, the global economy fundamentally changes. For the West, loss of cheap raw materials means higher costs, supply chain restructuring, and accepting African countries as equal partners rather than resource suppliers. For China, loss of monopoly on critical mineral processing means competition, higher costs, and negotiating with African countries that have leverage. And for Africa, economic sovereignty, job creation, rising incomes, and finally translating resource wealth into actual developments. Right now in 2025, we're watching this play out in real time. Cobalt quotas are being negotiated, lithium plants are under construction, cotton processing facilities are opening, gold refineries are coming online. 5 years from now, we will know whether this was a genuine revolution or another force down. 10 years from now, we will see if Africa broke the resource curse or just rearranged it. But I'll tell you what I believe. This time, I feel like it's different. The leverage is real. The coordination exists. The alternative has failed too many times, and a new generation of African leaders refuses to accept the old script. And that's it for today's video. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Africa can finally take control of its resources? And what do you think will be the biggest challenge along the way? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure to subscribe and tune in for the next video. This is African Insights with Hikma, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.